David Roches, professor at the Near East South Asia Center for Strategic Studies, is joining us now for further context on this issue. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. The president of Doctors Without Borders says it would take weeks, not days, to evacuate that hospital and would need to be done under some kind of ceasefire. And that, of course, is something Prime Minister Netanyahu says is not going to happen. So from a security standpoint, what's the potential solution here, if any?
Well, there's not a good solution. So, evacuating a hospital always is difficult. If you look, when we have hurricanes in the United States and we have to evacuate hospitals, that's a very, very difficult issue, and nobody's shooting at people. It does require the ability of workers to operate without hindrance, without fear of being shot at. That's a nasty situation that will not be easy. The problem for Israel is they have asserted that that hospital is being used basically as a pawn by Hamas. If that is true, then what that means is there's really not the good faith there to allow a hospital evacuation. I think Israel's argument is that Hamas views this as a win-win. Either Israel doesn't move in on the hospital, which Israel has asserted is, holds vital military components for Hamas, or Israel does move in and then gets the blame in the world community for any damage to the patients and the destruction of a humanitarian facility. So it's a real nasty situation for Israel, and it's even worse for the patients inside.
Can you explain the whole tunnel concept and because there are tunnels all over this area underground, reportedly under the hospital, under schools, under areas where if it is hit, it will hit civilians and hurt civilians?
Yeah, so what Israel has asserted is that Hamas has systematically built a system of tunnels and put their military infrastructure, so that's command and control, weapons storage facilities, rockets, and rocket launching sites, and then stored them deliberately under civilian infrastructure such as hospitals, mosques, schools. If this is true, what this means is that those facilities will have lost their status. Protected places under the law of armed conflict are hospitals, cultural sites. But if one side uses them for military advantage, if they put, say, weapons under a hospital to protect it, to protect the weapons from being bombed, then the hospital loses its protected status. The challenge here, there's two challenges. First, under the law of armed conflict, the military action that Israel takes to attack that has to be proportionate to the military goals. So you can't just destroy a hospital to get rid of one rocket. But the bigger challenge is that in international public opinion, it's holding Israel responsible for any civilian damage here. And Hamas knows this. So, Israel asserts that, the hospital, El Shifa Hospital, for example, has in effect lost its status as a protected facility because of Hamas's action. And that makes Hamas liable for any damage. But in the court of public opinion, they say, well, this is an Israeli bomb. So Israel's in a real quandary here.
And at the end of the day, this is always the big picture view. This was always going to be the problem. They said even before they went in, Hamas uses its own people there as shields. There's underground tunnels. They're in people's homes, hospitals, schools, places that shouldn't be attacked, but that's where they are, and that's why people predicted such a high civilian death count, which is what we're now seeing. Which is why people who are sympathetic to that said to Israel, "Why couldn't you approach this more surgically? Special ops teams, granted, maybe perhaps a longer, more complicated operation, but it would spare lives." Is that a realistic option? Was that ever a realistic option, or can you only just go in there and bomb the hell out of everything because of the way Hamas itself fights?
Well, it's a little bit of a false distinction. I've always said that surgical strike is a phrase of salesmanship, not of strategy, and there really is no such thing. But the problem is, to do that requires you to put your soldiers at considerable risk. And Israel does not have the military capacity. No army has the military capacity to fight an enemy like Hamas house by house, room by room. You'll just lose too many soldiers. They have to rely on their advantages of firepower. I think what really In effect, yes, the civilian hostage of Gaza, are being held hostage here. There is some evidence they're not being allowed to freely move, but to tell 2 million people, hey, you've got to just leave this area, that's not a realistic option as well. Israel looks at this and says, look, we're held to a higher standard. Syria, our neighbor, has for over a decade been deliberately targeting hospitals without any evidence of military involvement, and international public opinion doesn't give them a hard time because Syria is a dictatorship. But the fact remains, Israel is a democracy. It may be a flawed one, and it's not a democracy for everybody who lives in it, but it holds itself up to democratic standards, and international public opinion holds it to democratic standards. So they are expected to exercise more proportionality than a country such as Syria. And that's just a basic unfairness of life. If you want to be a democracy, you're held to democratic standards.
And basically, that's your way of saying that really the only way to do what they want to do is the way they're currently doing it. And that if there are casualties, that's just the nature of war. And just, is that fair?
Well, they should. My view is they should exercise more proportionality. I think Israel employs more firepower against a military target in a protected area than, say, the United States or Great Britain would.
Professor David Roches, thanks so much for sharing your expertise with us this morning. We could talk to you and ask questions for hours.
Yes.
Thank you.